Well, I'm really glad to be here with y'all today. This is a personal topic of mine as well. I also live Round Rock 15 minutes away from here next to Dell campus. And coincidentally, I also work at Dell. So my name is YJ. I'm a senior program manager for Dell for Startups here at Dell Technologies. And one of my focuses is how do I collaborate with different community leaders to provide workshops, to provide products, to provide services, and really how do we leverage all our dedicated business advisors to support small businesses, not only here in the US, but also now in Canada as well. And to share that with you is that we had 600 reps supporting small businesses that are calling out to small businesses every single day, and half of them are here in Round Rock, Texas. So with that being said, today I'm really excited to share with you some of my phenomenal community leaders here to my right. First, we have Eduardo Contreras. He's the founder and CEO of Contreras Ventures with over 25 years of experience in IT security, networking, telecommunications, and software industries. He has a proven track record of helping clients across various industries grow and improve their business from inside out, and he is an active participant in the Texas startup community, providing sponsorship, mentoring, and direct investments. Thanks, Eduardo, for being here. Next, we have Katie Woods, Vice President of Marketing at our bank. Katie is a recognized expert in marketing business efficiency. Her contributions have been instrumental in driving growth and success at the Hill Country Chamber of Commerce, propelling it to new heights. Her expertise spans across marketing, product development, event management, branding, PR, innovation, and more. She frequently speaks at local chambers and organizations, introducing tools and resources to help businesses enhance operational efficiency and increase their market presence. Thanks, Katie, for being here.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Writ, Baese, President of Hill Country Payroll. Hill Country Payroll is a regional firm specializing in payroll and HR solutions. With 29 years of experience, Writ has supported diverse range of clients from solopreneurs, large businesses with over 1,000 employees across Central Texas and nationwide. He holds a BA in economics at UT Austin and is an active contributor to the community, serving on various boards and positions in Round Rock. Thank you all for being here with me today. So before we start, I want to ask, how many of y'all have a small business? Okay. So the rest of y'all, so raise your hand down. How many of y'all are mentoring small businesses? And I'm assuming for those who didn't raise their hands, you guys are all investors and bankers here to support them? Yeah. Well, today you came here to talk, today we'll be talking about leveraging technology in today's small businesses. And one of the things that we really want to explore is how do we provide the technical tools, solutions, and what is the mindset that we can approach when it comes to a lot of these new technology solutions that are coming out. And so my first question to all three panelists is really the question on what are some of the most common challenges that you see that some of the small businesses are coming to you when it comes to technology? And then for Writ, what are some challenges that small businesses have when it comes to payroll and HR technologies? But Eduardo, if I can start with you first.
Absolutely. So thank you for being with us today. Technology is a very boring topic sometimes because it's tough to understand. We can get really deep into the weeds on technical matters, but my business, Alcon DTS, we've been around since 2001, and we work specifically with small, medium-sized businesses on their IT environments. And historically, we would look at how do we access our data. I have a remote sales force, what tools, what technologies exist to be able to allow my distributed workforce to be able to access our data. That was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Today, the majority of the new clients that we are introduced to, we're introduced to them because they had a cyber incident, right? Cyber incidents are something that most companies don't really think about. It's the ostrich head in the sand. I don't want to do it unless I feel the pain. Unfortunately, when you feel the pain, it's a lot of pain. So, what technologies, what are some of the issues that businesses are experiencing is really the topic of security. How do you secure the information? I can get really deep into that. I don't want to take up too much time. But there's an organization called NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technologies. And they came out with this thing called the CIA Triad. And it applies to everything in your technology, not just security, but all aspects of it. It's called the CIA Triad. It's the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And that applies to all your systems. So when you look at any tool, SaaS tool, point of sale tool, ERP, anything that you're using, think about that triad. How confidential is that platform? What is the integrity? How can I keep it accurate? And then what is the availability? How quickly and easily can I get to that data?
Thanks, Eduardo. And then, Katie, as someone who has a wealth of experience across all different business divisions, what are some typical things that you feel that small businesses have challenges with?
So in terms of technology, Eduardo mentioned something like it might be a little bit difficult to understand. I don't know if you guys heard of artificial intelligence or ChatGPT that came out a couple years ago. Anybody? Yeah, y'all are smiling, so I know there's some people in here. One thing that I've seen just with small businesses, it's understanding that and how you utilize it and incorporating it into the programs that you're using right now. You might face different challenges, whether that be coming up with content to write, how to use it on social media, and the different ways that you can integrate it. And so one thing that I would suggest when you're trying to implement that into your organization or your company is to identify your problem. What's taking up the most of your time? Is it the content writing? Is it the image generation? Is it video? And then find the artificial intelligence, those different platforms that can make you be more efficient. Another thing that Eduardo had mentioned was the security aspect of it. So I work for a financial institution, and one thing that we take very seriously is security. We don't utilize AI, I guess, on our inbound with our customer information. Banking it's a very private topic for some people. We have, your social security numbers, your balances, your address where you live. So we don't utilize that and upload any of our customers' data. So for us, that's a challenge. We can't utilize it across our different platforms. And I think Writ might be able to speak a little bit on that with his experience with HR and offering those different systems.
Yeah, so we, thank you very much, and thanks for moderating our panel, YJ. We appreciate it. This is it's an interesting topic and an exciting thing for us in the business that we're in, just because the technology that's available today, you used to have to work for Dell like YJ does to be able to enjoy some of the tools that are available today to somebody that even has 5 or 10 employees. So having the access to the technology and what's changed over the last even just in the last 4 or 5 years, but especially in the last 10 years, has created a scenario where people have options and business owners have tools available to them that they just never had access to before. And from a challenge perspective, I guess I'd talk about maybe 2 different things. There's a ton of things that we're seeing as people are coming in, but one of the biggest areas where we see a lot of opportunity for improvement is sort of from a streamlined hiring process perspective. And so what we see is people coming in and they've got a paper W-4, they're gathering paper documents, they've got an I-9 that's paper, when the employee is signing up for their benefits, now everything is done on paper, and that has to be provided into the health broker to be able to gather all that information and get all those enrollments completed. And so excuse me, having an applicant tracking system that manages your applications, and then you're able to then turn that into an onboarding situation where now you send the prospective employee an email, they're able to then use that email to log in and fill out the rest of the application, do their onboarding process online, select their benefits online. Now you've eliminated all of that paper. You've been particularly in today's workforce, where we're seeing more and more of a distributed workforce and people working remote, you don't have the security problems that you had before, where you've got documents being scanned and processed around. Everything is done electronically through one single database. So I think that's one area that's where there's a lot of opportunity, particularly in the 1 to 100 employee space, where people just aren't utilizing that technology like they might be able to. And then quickly, I guess the other thing I would say is, when you look at things like timekeeping, some of you may be aware that there are some rules that are now being changed, that throughout this year, the threshold for being able to pay somebody a salary is changing. It's currently the lowest level. You need to make $35,000 and change. And over the next few months, that's going to be ramping up by the first of the year to almost $59,000. So what that means is those people between $35,000 and $59,000 are now, you may not be able to call them a salaried employee, which then brings into, overtime and other things into the equation. Well, that's a fairly wide range of it's a 65% increase in that base salary, which really captures a lot of people in that space. And so being able to manage those hours electronically to be able to better, stay on top of overtime and other compliance issues is pretty important. And that's becoming a bigger thing because that space that is now, from 35 to almost 60 captures a lot of people where they're at. And the other way to fix that really potentially is to raise their pay. And that can be a really expensive endeavor. If you've got somebody at 45, do you really want to move them to 60, or do you want to be able to just better track their activities so that you stay in compliance? So those would be a couple of areas that we're seeing a lot of.
And I think one of the common themes that we're sharing is like, how do we leverage some of these technologies? Because I don't know if y'all heard about the term digital transformation, right? How many of y'all heard about the term digital transformation? And maybe just through reading. And one of the biggest things about digital transformation isn't necessarily always about making sure you have the latest tools, technology, or software, but how do we enable your employees and yourself to maximize it and get the things that you need to do to be more efficient, right? And a lot of the tools and a lot of advice that Eduardo shared and Katie shared is like, what's great about AI is that it allows us to understand, what our own current positions are and to get the results catered to certain situations. So just a question for the audience, how many of y'all currently use AI for your business? How many of y'all currently don't use AI but love to learn more about how to use AI? All right, so still a good amount of y'all, okay. So I think this kind of transitions to really my next question for my panelists here is, what are some ways in which AI technology can help you or some of the small businesses you work with to increase productivity and help make more informed decisions?
I'll lead off. So AI is a very powerful platform. There's many different flavors of it, right? So there's the Chat GPT, there's the Google Gemini, there's the Microsoft Copilot, even Twitter has their own XAI. So all these different platforms, they have a lot of value in the sense that they actually do the actual creation process. If you're stuck with a concept, I have an idea, but how do I put this idea on paper? You're able to put that idea into a chat prompt and say, here's my idea, and it will actually give you a starting point. That starting point is not something you ever want to publish as is. You want to use that as, here's my rough draft. I can now take this, polish it, and make it my own, right? So the use of AI is still in its infancy. We're seeing great new features with video and audio recognition where it can recognize what you're feeding it and give you a response, right? You say, hey, here's my pool equipment, it's making this funny noise. What's going on with it? And it'll tell you, oh, it sounds like your filter pump is acting up. You may want to replace that, right? So the intelligence is really advancing quickly. There's a lot of investment in it, right? As some of you may have seen, Elon Musk just got $6 billion raised in this latest series for his AI platform. But it being an MSP and protecting my clients' businesses, I'm always going to come back to the fact that you have to secure it, right? XAI, Google Gemini, all these different platforms are open. So what you're piping into it, it goes into the public realm. There have been many corporations who have piped in, industry-specific intellectual property into a Google chat and then realized we had to scrap the whole project because that's now publicly available, right? So you have to put safeguards around how you interact with AI. And to the types of tools that you want to explore, there is a Chat GPT, there's the various that I referenced. What we're pushing our clientele towards is you want to have robust tools that come at a reasonable cost. Microsoft has many different licensing types for enterprises, for small businesses, and even for nonprofits, where you can find a license type that fits your business type and need, and hopefully your budget. And the reason we push our customers to Microsoft specifically for AI, Microsoft Copilot, you can limit the extent of that AI to your Microsoft tenant. So what information you have in your tenant remains in your tenant. And then you can also say, hey, this is a public search, go search the web. So that is one safeguard, while remembering that what you put into into your cloud platform, if you point AI at it, it has access to all of it. So if you say, we have Microsoft, we're all in on the platform, we have all of our information, our departments are in SharePoint, and you say, hey, Copilot, go tell me the payroll information, and if that user has access to it, because you didn't secure that proper directory, all of a sudden, everybody has access to payroll information from the HR folder. Google, any AI is great at gathering information. So that's another safeguard is you do want to make sure you're careful about what you pipe into it and what you give it access to.
Toro. Katie?
So I think in my position, one of the ways that I utilize it, our marketing department, it's just myself and one other individual that works for me. We're a very small marketing department, and I have 10 banking centers across various markets that I have to come up with plans for. And so one way that I utilize it is to do the market research for me. Previously, I would sit there and it would take me months to go through all of our data, everything that we have, look at what our competitors are doing, and then try to propose a plan and then be able to allocate efficiently across the different channels that we're marketing. So that's one way that I've used it. I think you had mentioned inputting the data and then prompting it to get what you want. So I'm going to share a story with you. Since I took over marketing for our bank, once a year, and this has always been a dreadful project for me, I have to write a few pages that goes out into our annual shareholder book. And I would spend weeks doing that, coming up with what I wanted to say and then writing it and rewriting it and the editing. It just took up so much of my time. But after AI came out, I prompted it, I let it know, these are the different strategies I utilize, this is what I want to use going forward. I told it who my audience was, gave it the tone of voice. I was done in less than 30 minutes. I think my boss even told me that year that this was the best column that I ever wrote. So it is still a secret, and so we're all friends now. It's going to stay in this room. We're not going to tell my boss that I used a robot to start writing those columns. Another thing that's funny, I work with a lot of our lenders. I work close with them, and they're not very efficient on getting things back to me, especially when it's writing pieces. And so I started utilizing it that way as well, and I let them know the personality. I prompt it that way. I ask it to provide quotes, and I'll send it to my lenders for review, and they come back so quick, and they're like, Katie, you know me, you understand me. That sounds exactly like something I would have wrote. And so just from the efficiency standpoint, it's been so helpful. Keeping up with Google reviews as business owners, sometimes we get those bad reviews and it's hard to respond. Prompting it, putting the Google review in there and having it generate a positive response to that, that's another way that you utilize it, the efficiency standpoint. But then looking at how you can incorporate it into your different businesses, taking all of your Google reviews, downloading all of those and putting it into AI and coming up with a common trend of what people are saying about your business, that gives you an area that you can focus on to improve. So there's so many different platforms of artificial intelligence out there. I think it's endless on how we can utilize it. We just have to identify the different priorities for our business.
Thanks for sharing, Kitty. If everything's going to stay in this room, I may or may not have used it for my end of year performance reviews as well. For talking to some of my coworkers who I feel like are coming a little bit aggressive. And maybe for talking to my mom as well, was sometimes where he did. But all that being said, I think, Eduardo, you made a really good point about security as well, because a lot of these ChatGPT tools or AI tools, they have terms and conditions. So having a trusted MSP to really tell you about hey, these are the concerns, because everything you put up, there's someone that, even in some of the terms and conditions, we may have someone, employees actually looking at your input and reviewing and utilizing it to train their data model. And so everything that you use on these data models, be conscious that if it's client-facing, is it from a marketing piece, then it may be okay. But if you're putting private customer data, you may be risking some of your customer information from being out there in the public. Writ, on your side, how has some of the AI technology, whether it's for your small business or yourself, have you seen being utilized for your day-to-day?
Yeah, so similar to Katie, we're pretty careful about how we manage our database, and so we don't use it internally a lot. There are a lot of things that are coming through our software where it's self-contained within the software to be able to do things like starting to track employee sentiment, so how employees feel about their job, and you're able to do that using multiple data points within the software related to their time cards and how they're doing. You can include things like weekly employee surveys. You can do short ones, you can do long ones, and over time you're able to build profiles. And so those are the things that we're seeing kind of coming. But then, just from a business perspective, I think we're very similar to Katie in that we, don't use it with our customer data, but we are using it from, more of a marketing perspective. I've been using it to draft emails and, a lot of things that probably the folks in here are using it for. So, but I mentioned to them earlier, I think probably the biggest thing for me, and maybe I'm just way behind the curve, but it has been the biggest adjustment for me has been a mindset change of when I have something in front of me that I need to do, and making sure that's like my default response is, okay, I need to go to ChatGPT or wherever to start working on this. Otherwise, I find myself halfway through a project realizing, I could have done this a lot better and faster, but now I'm an hour and a half into something that I could have done in 15 minutes because I didn't, it's not in my head. And I'm kind of crossing that threshold now, but I think that was been a big learning thing for me, was just, getting it, into my head that that's the direction to go. So
I do have one. So one actual use case that we use at Alcon DTS is, as a IT provider, it's a complicated industry. What are we selling? What value are we bringing to our clients? It's a tough concept, right? I'm not selling you a product, I'm selling you a relationship. We are your IT department, right? So on our website, we try to be as creative with the content and put information that kind of describes what it is that we do and why you need it, right? So it's tough to go and create that content. What we did is we got a chatbot, and that chatbot, it read our entire website, it read specific content that we fed it. So we had white papers that we've written, we had other marketing collateral, and we just fed that into the chatbot that went onto our website. So now you can go to our website and you can ask it questions, right? What does your service do? Are you able to help me with my printer? Do you have contracts? What do those contracts look like? Who are your other, we don't say customers, but do you have other clientele in this industry or sector? And the chatbot itself will answer a lot of those questions. We get the feedback, so we see those interactions, so we start seeing the common trend. What are visitors to our website asking? What are we not clear about that maybe we need to make more clear? So AI with a chatbot is a wonderful resource that you can put on your website. You can containerize what information you're putting out there. And I mean, that's better than having somebody call your office or a third-party marketing service, in my opinion.
I really like the website piece because I've also, one of the ways, cases that you could potentially utilize AI for is to help create the copy for your website too, especially some of the digital media or the graphics. You actually helped me tie off into my next question, which was, what are some tools and platforms? And then at Dell, I don't know if many of y'all have heard, but Dell recently reached our 40th anniversary this year. And one of the things that was announced during Dell Tech World is that we're now incorporating AI or NPUs or chipsets into some of our hardware to help better optimize some of the performance so it knows what type of programs and software they're using. With that said, I have a question for you, Katie and Writ, as well as in your fields, what are some additional tools and platforms that you would recommend for small business to help explore and improve productivity? And then for Writ yourself, maybe what are some tools to help people with retaining and improving employee satisfaction?
Oh gosh, where to even start, because there's so many out there. I'll start with the top ones that I use. ChatGPT, that of course was one of the first ones that came out. I've been utilizing it since they released it. Recently, they did an upgrade to it. I don't know if any of you have seen the ChatGPT O. Anybody seen that, the release of it? It came out a couple of weeks ago, and so I was watching the demonstration, and not only can you upload documents now and have it analyze it or prompt it in different ways to help you come up with different things to help your business, it can see. They enabled it to have a camera capability to where you can talk back and forth with it. And so from the things that it sees, it can help you move your business forward. One of the examples that they gave when they were doing the demonstration, it was not giving the answer but helping the person solve a complex math problem. So I'm gonna share another story with you that's gonna stay here. I work for a financial institution, and I'm not good at math. I'm just not. And so I went to grad school a couple of years ago, and one of the required courses was statistics. And so I had to drive back and forth to campus and spend hours there with the tutor to help me get through this. But can you imagine if we had this technology a couple of years ago and I could have turned that camera on and it helped me solve my statistic problems? Like, it would have been amazing if we would have had this a few years ago. Another thing that it can do, and actually I've shared this story with a couple of people already today. I was sitting out in the lobby earlier, and I was reading through some of my notes for some of the things I wanted to talk to you about. And a young lady came up to me, and she didn't speak English. She spoke very little English, and so she was trying to ask me for help. Well, it's a language barrier. I can't speak Spanish. And so she walked off, and then I thought I had my phone sitting next to me, so I pulled it out. I opened ChatGPT. I turned it on live, and I told it, I need you to translate this conversation English to Spanish and vice versa. And so I was able to help her. I found out exactly what she needed to do and where she needed to go. And so instead of her walking around, and trying to figure that out, we got her there in just a couple of minutes. So those types of capabilities for your business are amazing. Another one that's really, that I really like using, it's Canva. I mean, Canva's just there. It's been there. It's a great tool. They're actually releasing something here in the next couple of weeks. It's called the Canva Glow Up. It has different platforms, ChatGPT, DALL-E, the image generators. They all integrate into one. And so you can go into Canva and use all of these different AI models and come up with different things. I was actually sharing with Writ earlier, there's a whole HR feature in that you can come up with trainings and reasons that you would use this. People are different types of learners. Not everybody learns from reading scripts, but if you take your script and you use an AI, an AI platform or prompt the different voices, like the video goes so much further, and people, they interpret things different and they retain knowledge different. So all of that, it's not here, it's coming, and it's only getting better. So Canva's another really great one.
Awesome. It was very cool how you helped her out in the hallway there. So I would say from a payroll and HR tech perspective, one of the biggest things that we're seeing more and more adoption from, and some people have been using it for years and years and years, but really getting more into employee self-service and being able to have a strong mobile app that allows folks to be on the go and doing the things that they're doing, but still be able to access their data and understand the data. And a big part of that, for example, is just the benefits piece. You've got somebody that has a child and needs to, make an amendment or make a change to their benefits, and they're able to log in from their phone, make those changes. It ensures that the change gets made correctly, the deduction to their payroll is done correctly. All of these things feed through and happen kind of in a smooth and much more elegant way than a paper process. And those are the kind of things that provide a lot of value to employees and make them feel like, they feel, wanted, they feel like they're, involved in the process, and it just adds a lot of, it just gives them a lot better control of the situation. So we've seen a lot of smaller businesses, and like especially in the 1 to 100 space, adopting a lot more of these technologies to be able to help their employees. I mentioned earlier, like employee surveys. So there's so many different things that can be done too to just better understand where your employees are at and be able to sort of help them. We're seeing more and more and more about, from a software perspective, the decisions that are being made in the development are being made, from an employee-centric perspective, and, not just about the numbers and the taxes, but, what's the employee experience like? How easy is this going to be for them to adopt? And so looking at those kind of things makes a difference in being able to, kind of create a culture and an environment that you want for your employees.
Thanks, Writ. And then I think one of the things when we talk about all these tools that we have the ability to use and different accesses that some of our employees have when it comes to utilizing these tools for the business, I think one of the things that we definitely have to talk about is when it comes to security or compliance. Eduardo, I'm going to start with you. How important it is that we have a good cybersecurity plan, and why is it that we need to talk about it as a small business?
So I think any business, small or large, you do have the requirement of making sure that you're protecting data, your data plus your customers' data. And this comes in many different flavors. You mentioned the word compliance, right? Regulatory compliance. So if you're a small, medical practice, you still have to comply with HIPAA. It doesn't matter that you don't have a $10 million company. It matters that you're taking in PHI. And that PHI is regulated and you need to protect it. So there's a whole HIPAA framework that you have to be able to implement, which is technology safeguards, that's policies and procedures, and that's administrative tasks that all are involved in implementing HIPAA, right? If you go into an accounting space, if you're in finance, you start working with a municipality or a federal government agency. There's all these different acronyms, CMMC, PCI, NIST, all these different regulatory compliances that you're going to have to comply with, right? You're going to have to embrace them, understand them, and implement them in your company. It doesn't matter how big or small you are. And even if you say, well, I'm not working directly with a federal agency, I work for, my customer is big company one, and I sell them a widget. I manufacture a widget or I polish a widget. Well, if your client works with the federal government, that's supply chain. And supply chain goes downstream. So if your client has a client that's the Department of Defense, and they manufacture something and you provide a piece to them, well, your client has to comply with CMMC. And part of that regulation means that any vendor they use, AKA your business, also has to comply with CMMC. So you hear stories, the old story that everybody's heard of, it's kind of getting dated now, is Target got breached. Target had a humongous breach of its point of sale system. How did it happen? Well, it happened from an air conditioning vendor who actually had a network connection into the Target network to monitor all the different controls for the environmental control systems, and there was a breach. So the vendor itself got breached by a bad actor. The bad actor found the path to Target, said, oh, look at this. This is a very big pot of gold. So hackers are very good at looking laterally and determining what all do I have access to. So through that network connection, they were able to breach the Target point of sale system. Hence, they took a ton of credit card information, and that was a very big lawsuit that ensued, right? Target itself had very good controls, except they didn't monitor this supply chain risk specifically for that one vendor. So this can happen to everybody, big and small. What that translates to you is all the bigger companies are now looking downstream to the small businesses to make sure you are protecting to the standard that they have to follow.
And there's usually a lot of large fines when it comes to not being able to protect your customers' data. Some of these fines are things that, as a small business owner, you might not be able to take. And so for Dell, a lot of us, we love our managed service providers because they are there to be able to be there with you, boots on grounds, to understand your IT environment and really provide you that recommendation. And for us, we're supporting the MSPs with any of the technology updates. For Katie and Writ, on your side, how important is some of the data and compliance issues when it comes to the partners and businesses that you work with?
So for us, I had mentioned we don't put any of our customers' information in there because of those reasons of data breaches and things getting out there. One thing that I would stress is the two-factor authentication on all of your accounts, how important that is. I'm going to put my banker hat on. While we're sitting here and trying to figure out AI and how we can use it to be efficient, you're going to have the opposite end of that, of people trying to use it, the bad actors, and how they can use it to scam you. This scenario did not happen to our bank, but we sit there and we look at the different ways that people are utilizing AI so we can be proactive in helping our customers and preventing fraud. There was a bank here in the United States that they used voice cloning. And so they called this mom, and the voice cloning was of her daughter. She had been kidnapped, and her daughter had a very distinct cry. And so it was of her daughter crying, and it cloned it completely. And so she thought it was her daughter, and so she sent the money. Her daughter called her later that day, and she was completely fine. So there's different ways that people are using this, for the negative way. My bankers are sitting back there. They probably have different stories that they can share after this panel's over of just the different ways that the bad actors are using it to try to take advantage of small businesses. So.
Thanks, Katie.
I think in our world, there's a couple of things. So first of all, from a software perspective, there are a lot of things that these providers are doing. And so, when you look at it purely from a software perspective, there's things related to encryption, how the data is hosted, all of those kind of things. And I'm going to set all that aside and talk more about what you as a business owner can do, because some of these things you can affect, it doesn't matter which system you're using, there are things that you can do. And so the first thing, and Katie really hit on it, is multi-factor authentication. If you're not using that, you should be using it, and you should be using it everywhere. Our clients use it, and the way it's set up is sort of roles-based as well. So depending on your role, if you are the admin and you have access to everything, the way that MFA works is going to be a little bit different. If you're the employee and there's much more restricted kind of access and what it ultimately could mean in the end, then the process becomes, we want it to be usable. You have to balance usability with security and safety, with obviously with a nod to security and safety, but using multi-factor authentication is extremely important. We also really focus a lot of time and energy on roles-based security. So what that means is, if you don't need access to something, you don't have access to it. So it just, not so much that we don't want you to have it, but the less people that have access to certain things, the less opportunity there are for things to go wrong or for things to happen. And then the last thing, I would kind of touch on is, I mentioned earlier about employee self-service and how important that is. And one of the really big factors with employee self-service is the ability to update your own information. So you can change your address, you can change your bank account, things like that. And why that's extremely important is we're seeing literally 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times a week, we hear from clients where they have gotten emails from employees asking them to change bank information, and those emails are coming from spoofed email addresses. And so, and the number of times that the client, our clients or the business owners will bite on that is, the sheer volume of it, the number of times it happens, all it takes is 1%, and it's a huge issue. And basically what they're doing is saying, hey, change my bank account to this routing and this account number. In many cases, it'll be, a green dot or some other kind of card, and that paycheck will go through, and as soon as that paycheck goes through, that money is moved from that account and it is gone. And the employee didn't get paid, the business is out. And all this is based on an email thread that shouldn't have happened to begin with. So by putting in place the right technology from an employee self-service perspective, now the employee owns that maintenance. You can direct them to make those changes. They're happening all online, and you get out of that whole loop of having somebody with access to that data through kind of that email process. So,
yeah. And one of the things I think when it comes to technologies too is, like, you can implement all these technology measures in place. A lot of it also has to deal with training your employees and staff. And Eduardo, I know you can attest to this, is that there's many times when I've even received email where people would clone themselves, where they would just put, I'll give you an example, someone's name, .chamber of commerce at outlook.com, right? And I've received this email and I've seen employees circulating, and I was like, guys, this is not the chamber. Like, we need to go back and report this. And one of the things that Dell does that I would encourage you as a small business owner to do is find these educational training, because part of it is a lot of security is social engineering, right? How do we, and that's why you need the right partners and right people like this, the panelists here, to really understand, like, hey, what are some things and security protections that I need to put in place to not only protect my employees, but to protect ourselves from being attacked by false actors. I know we're close at time, so I think I'll just ask the panelists before we open it up to a few Q&A is, if there's a piece of advice or a takeaway that you would love our small business owners to be aware of, what would that be?
I'll kick it off. So a couple of things, right? So what you just spoke to about the spoofing and the risk, know this, right? The human is the weakest link when it comes to your technology risk. So cybersecurity awareness training is something that everybody needs to be participating in. Not just the executive level, but everybody who has access to email or any kind of data that the company has in its information store. So information security key, but cybersecurity awareness training for all your team members is critical. But also a huge time saver, and we leverage this internally, is, people started getting into the habit of all these web meetings, whether it be a Teams or a Zoom or whatever platform you're using for these meetings. Sometimes you can't participate, or what, I want to record it, so I want to go back and watch it to make sure I didn't miss anything. Well, that's very time intensive. So back to AI and the time savings, now there's all this transcription AI. You have these plugins, so you can go through your meeting with your client or your team, and any action items, any information that is pertinent will be put into a summary for you. And that right there, that quick little summary that you can read in 90 seconds will summarize a 90-minute meeting. So I think that's a huge takeaway. It's been a huge benefit for us, a huge time saver, and also it keeps you on track, right? Because you may or may not go watch that video, and all of a sudden you forgot an action item, a deliverable you were supposed to work on. So I think that's a huge time saver that everybody should really consider.
Eduardo took my answer. Kidding. I think just overall, it's, educating your employees, both on how to utilize the different platforms, the different artificial intelligences, and how you want them to implement that in your organization to be more efficient. Can you imagine if you show them all this and your employees have extra time to dedicate to different tasks, how efficient they would be? But on the security standpoint, I can't echo that enough of how important that education piece is, of just teaching them the different parts of how you look for different things in emails to be able to recognize the ones that are fake. We see it all the time. Like, fraud is out there. They are after people's money, and they are finding so many bad ways to use this type of technology. So the education piece, both on how to use it proactively, but then how to also use it to be able to protect your business, would be my top ones for you to take away.
I'm going to just add on one thing to that, too. They both talked about education, how important that is. And one of the things that we do with our team is we get emails sent to all of our team members 2 or 3 or 4 times a month, all kinds of different things. And they're all from our MSP, basically testing them. And they're all the newest things, and we continue to do that testing. And if, we're very fortunate that almost every single time they don't bite it, but if that does happen, then we're able then to figure out, okay, where was our weak spot? How do we train on this and go back? So looking into some way to be tested as well, I think, not just the training, but actually the real, send the real emails, and let's see what happens. I think that's really important. And then lastly, I would just say, I mentioned it earlier, but look at what you're doing from an HR and a payroll tech services, perspective. If you've been in business for a while, look at what the options are. You may have better options that will streamline your process. There's just so many things that are available today to a small business that you just could not do even 10 years ago. It's mind-blowing. So, be sure you look at your options there, because there are a lot of resources available.
And to just help close on this, as a small business owner, you may not feel like you have the information that attackers are trying to steal. You may not feel like you're big enough, but I want to tell you that you are so important, that the chamber, that the governor, that the panelists here are trying to spend time with you, and similarly other people will try to leverage that. And what's great about us being in this room together is that we are all great at certain things. How can we leverage and how can we connect with each other that attended this panel together to figure out how we can support each other for the city of Round Rock. So with that being said, I just want to thank my panelists today for being here. Thank you for your time. And do I have time for questions? For 2 minutes. So that means maybe 2 questions. 2 questions. Can you say your name and your business as well? Or
I know that HR consulting practice, so I've been seeing more of the AI transcription tools, and I think they're really cool. And how do you use those safely, so that the contents of your meeting don't end up going out?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is a valid concern. And this is where understanding what the back end of that AI tool is, right? So what we do with our clientele is we basically say, Microsoft is a chosen platform. We find a licensing model that fits for you, and we use a co-pilot aspect of that. because that is constrained to your tenant. If you use a third party, something you found on some SaaS platform, Cool Tools R Us, you don't know what that back end is, right? So the end user licensing agreement is, we might be just taking all your information. If you're having a confidential meeting with a client or an employee or other, that's going into somebody's back end that you have no idea where that data is going. So leveraging a tool from a known provider, like I said, we stick with Microsoft for that specific reason, you can at least have some sense of security that it's in your tenant. Now, of course, can your tenant be breached? Yes, you want to put some safeguards around that as well. But at least that's a step in the right direction to make sure that you're at least containerizing it in an environment that you control.
Any other questions? We have time for one last question. Hey, Writ, no?
They're in the front.
Oh, really? Okay. What's your question?
So for a small business without a risk management strategy in place, how would those invest so you need to build this and CRG and how secure it out?
I'm happy to answer.
So for our bank, we have a process before we onload any of our vendors, and it goes through an entire security risk process before we do that. So that's one thing that we have in place. So we look at all of the due diligence on any of the vendors that we're considering, and it goes through various channels and various levels of review before we ever implement that. So that would be my suggestion, is to have some type of platform like that in place or process in place to where everything's being reviewed from the security risk officer to a compliance officer to a technology officer, because they all see different pieces of the platforms that you're wanting to implement, and they all have a different perspective on it. So when you see something shiny and fancy, don't just sign up for it. Have various people look at it.
I would also add to that, you know, if you're a small business, depending on what business you're in and what your strengths are, utilize resources to, like, for example, your MSP. If you're not an IT person, you know, and you need to bring another service in, reach out to them and, you know, say, hey, can you look at this for me and help me understand what the implications are? If you're small and you don't have a chief security officer or those kind of people, there are resources out there, kind of similar to what John was saying in his keynote earlier today about making sure you've got those advisors. And I think this is an area where, as a small business, you know, reach out and find those people that can serve in those roles until you grow large enough to have those in-house.
And my shameless plug as an MSP is to seek out an MSP, right? Because we're going to have the tools and resources to bring all those various roles and components to the table, right? Understanding your industry, understanding your contractual obligations, and being able to comply with that. So having a professional team, an MSP you trust, an MSP who knows your sector, will be the best bet to make sure, because even if it's not just in your line of business, just getting cybersecurity insurance, the insurance broker is going to provide you with a whole long list of requirements, endpoint protection, SIM, EDR, down the list, that basically you're already implementing a minor framework. So having a partner that can walk you through that would be key. You have an MSP, they're doing monthly, you know, fish testing. That's fantastic. That's a part of a good cybersecurity program.
Well, that's it for questions, and I'll just add on that, you know, I appreciate my MSPs because they're the best customer success managers. They're your advocates, and they can help you really navigate, like, how do you talk to big corporations to make sure that you're getting the right products and services that you want as well. And similarly, all the partners here in the Round Rock Chambers. So that being said, thank you all for being